Welcome to today's economic lesson. My name is Mr. Berry. This lesson is brought to you by the Northern Cape Department of Education in collaboration with Pagama Research and Development. Good day again, grade 12. Today we are going to continue with our revision program for paper 2. We'll be looking at environmental sustainability as our topic for today. Remember, on your economic issues, we are having 3 subtopics. So your economic issue is the main topic. There is 3 subtopics, which is your inflation, there's tourism, and then the last one is environmental sustainability. So all these 3 units are very important for you to prepare for your paper 2. You find this kind of questions in section A, which is compulsory for your paper 2, where there's 30 marks. And you also find this economic issue in question 3 of section B. Remember, section B, there are 3 questions that you can find there. It is your question 2, 3, and 4 out of 40 marks each. And then you will only be choosing 2 questions that will make your 80 marks. So for that 80 marks, you can answer question 3, which is 40 marks, all in economic issues, which is your inflation, tourism, and environment for question 3. Then when you get to question 4 again, you'll find half of the question, which is 20 marks out of 40, it is economic issues as well. And also on section C, which is your essay now, there are 2 questions, you need to only choose 1. Then economic issues will be question 6. So the essay that you'll be asked in question 6 will be coming from economic issues. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about an essay on inflation. You may find essay on inflation on question 6. You may find essay on tourism or environmental sustainability. Remember, there are 6 essays that are in economic issues. So out of that 6 essays, if you can master all of them, then one of them is definitely coming on question number 6. This is for your prelim, also for your final exam. Out of the 6 essay on economic issues, one of them will come. So if you master all of them, then you know that you are having that 30 marks beside the additional part of the essay. Remember, additional part, it can be any high order question that they are giving you. So based on that topic or something that is around our economy that you can be asked about on your additional part. Right, so at the end of this lesson, our objectives for today is to make sure that you are able to respond to section C of your paper 2 when you write your prelim. This it's only if environmental sustainability come as an essay when you are writing your paper 2 on the 10th. So if environmental sustainability come as an essay, then after this lesson, you'll be able to write that essay for 40 marks, or let's say rather 30 marks, because the additional part can change. Right, so this is how your paper 2 looks like. You have 2 main topics, your microeconomics, you have your economic issues. There are 3 subtopics per a main topic. So you are having 6 subtopics, unlike in paper 1 where you are having 8 subtopics. In paper 2 you are having 6 subtopics, and you can really master all these 6 subtopics so that you can get your distinction. If you are planning for a distinction, if you can master both both main topics, then you can master to get a very good mark. And also specializing is not a problem. If you're saying, I'm going to specialize in the economic issue, right? The only problem is that you still have to answer some question on the microeconomics. But however, if you say, I'm going to master the economic issue, I'm going to know my inflation. So anything that you ask from inflation, if somebody wakes you up and asks you what is core inflation, you can answer that. If you master your tourism, you can answer any question around tourism and environmental sustainability. It will guarantee you to pass However, when it comes to question 4 and question 1, then this is where you will also have to know your microeconomics. So that's why we say you need to master all your main topics. Right, let's look at our pre-knowledge for environmental sustainability. Right, so on your examination guideline that you are using of 2021, you have the state of the environment, you have measures to ensure sustainability, and you have international measures. So you've learned the state of the environment. You've looked at things like preserving, conserving, pollution effect on our environment. You have looked at soil erosion, deforestation. Those are the terms that we use around the state of the environment. To look at the environment, what is environmental sustainability? Meaning that our environment should survive the economic activities of today, but do not compromise those of the future generation. So we look at things that are happening around our environment. We're looking at our plants, animals, as human beings as well. So then we moved to measures to ensure sustainability. There we spoke of how can the market, meaning the producers and supplier, take care of the environment. And then we said, right, the market as the demand and the supplier, meaning consumer and producers, without government intervention. They find it very difficult to take care of this environment because we mostly look for our self-interest. What do I mean by that? As producers, we want to make profit. As consumer, we want to benefit as much as we can from the environment. So that's why sometimes we cannot take care of environment. So we can't ensure environmental sustainability. Why? Because sometimes we lack the knowledge to take care of the environment. Sometimes we have the knowledge. We've learned about this in the school. We know that we must not litter. However, we are careless, right? And sometimes we do not care of the external cost, right? Which is your social cost. We care more about the private benefit, right? So businesses, when they produce, they care about the benefit, which is the profit, than caring about the environment around them. Then that's when the government comes in, and then we are having an essay there where the government comes in to ensure environmental sustainability through certain things, policies that they are having there, that having your direct control, command and control. They are charging for environmental use, paying green taxes. So those are the ways that government can force us to take care of the environment, right? That was on 14.2 of your examination guideline. Then 14.3 of the examination guideline, you did international measures, right? So here we said, when the environment is being deteriorating or the state of the environment is decreasing, meaning our environment is not as healthy as it should be, it's not only the South African problem. However, it's an international problem, right? Let's look at air pollution, for example. Air being polluted in a neighboring country can affect South Africa, right? The water in the ocean being polluted in our neighboring country, the ocean runs to your country as well. So it does affect our water in South Africa. So it's not a problem of one country, it's an international problem. So here on international measures, grade 12, you learned that we are having problems. Loss of biodiversity, climate change, those are the hazardous waste, chemical waste. Those are the problems that we have as countries when it comes to environment. So we did an essay here talking about problems and also solution. Remember, when you are doing economics, you know that everything has a problem. Even if we are trying to combat a problem, we create a new problem. However, we need to come up with a solution again, even though there will be an effect. If there's an effect again, we come up with a new solution. Even this one, we've identified that we are having loss of biodiversity. We are losing our species as countries. that is part of environment. Then we come up with solution. What protocol are we going to use? Are we going to use Kyoto Protocol? International protocol that we may use for that problem? Then we've discussed that on an essay. So there are 2 essays that have been identified, which are very possible for your prelim, are very possible for your final examination, right? So you have one here and you have one here. The first one is the one where we say government involvement to ensure environmental sustainability. The next one is speaking of international problems and measures to solve those problems. So this is what we are going to look at today on your lesson. Right, let's look at the structure of the essay. Since today our focus is your section C. So your essay will look like this. You have 2 marks for introduction, which is a lower order response. So if the question, for example, now is speaking of environmental sustainability, you have an essay on environmental sustainability. You can introduce this by describing what is environmental sustainability, right? So this is where you can define, you can describe, but whatever that you write on introduction, it must not included in any part of the question anymore. So if you've described what is environmental sustainability, you must not describe environmental sustainability on your body, on your additional, or on your conclusion. So it's better to describe a term, because if you take the main point from the body and then you start describing what is granting property rights as an introduction, we may give you the mark for that introduction. But when we get to the body, now we are no longer marking the facts of what? Granting property rights. So you may be losing more marks in the body because you prioritized the introduction for 2 marks. So rather you just bring a lower order description there and then you put that statement there. You do not repeat the statement again. Right, then you have your main body is 26 marks. This 26 marks, if you are not given headings, we can mark up to 8 marks, which is your heading, examples, and whatsoever, and listing of information, right? Let's just put it that way. Say heading, example, and listing, you'll be marked out of 8 marks. And then all this discussion and full sentences, you score yourself 18 marks. Right, but then this is if you are not given headings. If you are given headings, chances are you may not have 8 examples, right? You may have maybe 4 or 3 examples. Then you'll get more marks for explaining. You may get maybe 22 marks for explaining, and then those examples you may get 4 marks for examples. But if you have more than 4 examples, then we can give you up to 8 marks. Right, then we have the additional part. This one, it's your higher order. You'll be asked to evaluate, to give effects, to critically evaluate, to calculate, right? So it's a higher order question. They can ask you anything. This one, it requires you to think critically when you are responding to your additional part. Then you have your conclusion. It's a higher order question as well. You need to conclude in a higher note. You need to sum up your information without repeating what you've written in other parts. Then that will be your 40 marks. Let's look at our first essay question that we're going to do. We have 2 essay questions. We're going to do both 2 essay questions. So the first essay question says, discuss in detail how the government can ensure sustainability. Right, so your essay does not have headings, meaning if you write the headings, you're going to score yourself marks. Additional part says, why have the international measures, agreements been effective in reducing the effects of climate change? So we have a problem that is climate change, and we have international measures that are there to solve the problem of climate change. How have they been ineffective in reducing climate change? So you say that the international measures hasn't worked because of this and this and this. Therefore, it couldn't reduce the effect of climate change. What you need to understand here, grade 12, is to understand what is climate change, what causes climate change, and then what international measure or agreements we have. Then you'll be able to answer this question. Like mentioned, that you can find any question on additional part, and it's not as easy as you want it to be. It's not a question that you'll find in the textbook. It's a higher order question. Right, we're going to go through the essay and see what is the marking guideline looking like. But prior to that, as a reminder to you, because we've done this essay in the classroom as well, as a reminder to you, I'll be giving you about 25 minutes to complete the body, the additional part, your conclusion, and your introduction, just to revise in this essay. Then we'll go through the marking guideline together to see that your points do get a mark or not. Right, your time will start now. You take out your pen and your book and you start writing this essay. Then after that, we'll look at the marking guideline. Your time will begin now, grade 12. You may start writing. Right, thank you, grade 12, for using your time to write the essay. Let's look at the responses. Remember, you must have introduction, you must have body, you must have the additional part, and you must have conclusion. So you need to get used to writing this essay, because you don't want to waste your time when you get to exam to spend the entire hour writing an essay. So you must at least spend 30 minutes or less on your essay. Right. Let's look at the responses. Remember, it doesn't have to be exactly as it's written here. However, you may even raise your hand and ask your teacher if your introduction does make sense. Let's look at the introduction here. Environmental sustainability may be described as the development that satisfies the current needs of the people without compromising the quality of the environment, so that it remains equally capable of supporting the future generation too. So if you said environmental sustainability, it means that our environment can survive our economics activity of today without compromising for the future generation. You are still correct. Right, so if you've described what is environment as well, you're still correct. If you describe that environment is the things that are in the nature that we see, maybe you have listed those environment that you're speaking of, then you'll be still correct, or any other lower order introduction. Right, we go to the body. So you will be marking yourself the headings as well, because we were not given headings, so there will be a mark for a heading. So the first one there is granting of property rights. So this is way that government can intervene as well, by granting property rights. The conservationist effect. It ensures that people care for the things that belong to them. So if you said granting of property right ensures that people take care of the things that belongs to them, then you are correct. What is granting property rights? Government is giving a producer or a certain business or individuals rights for an environment. So if you are given rights for a certain environment, it means that you are going to take care of that environment at a less cost to the government. So the taxpayers don't have to pay for that environment, because you are there and you are taking care of the environment. You are going to take care of that environment for as long as you are making revenue from it, right? As long as you are making profit from it, the generation after the generation, your own generation will be taking care of that environment, right? So people have a tendency of taking care of the things that belong to them. An example is that when you are at home, you won't throw a paper everywhere in the yard, because you'll be the one sweeping that yard again. But then when you are walking the street, you do have the audacity to just throw away, which is wrong. It's littering, but then you do it. But then when you are at home, you don't throw away the paper in your sitting room, because you know that will be your job again. So you see that it's easy to take care of things that belong to you. You know, this is your home, so you can't be throwing papers everywhere inside your house, right? So also government, by providing this, by giving this property rights, people get to take care of what belongs to them more. So to prevent fauna plus flora species from being extinct, So we have these species that if are not taken care of, we may lose them for good. So that's why we grant property rights, so that the owners can take care of those kind of species that we may lose for good. Allow people property right. It has little to no impact on taxpayers. You are the one owning that a game reserve, for example. You're going to take care of the animals at no impact to taxpayers. Government does not have to give money for you to take care of things that are belonging to you. For this reason, the government might grant property rights over a specific area. Property rights empowers owners to negotiate contracts with businesses who wish to exploit the area's resources. Right, so these are some pointers that you may have under granting property rights. If you are having a different response that you feel like it is correct, then you may ask the teacher to assist with that point. It may be correct. Remember, we are taking any other relevant correct, not any relevant, but then a relevant correct response. Right, the next one is paying for environmental use. Remember to mark your heading. Paying for environmental use. Price the environment. The government levies fees for the waste produced and dumped in the environment. So we are paying for environmental use. The waste that we are putting in the environment, then we are going to pay for, either producers or consumers, for using the environment. How are we paying that? In South Africa, local authorities, those are your municipalities. The local authorities levy charges on rubbish collection and sewage disposals. So there's a bill that comes to your house monthly that says you are owing for rates and taxes. So for collection of garbage, when you see the municipality trucks passing by collecting rubbish, we're paying for that. For the sewage disposal, using facilities that are flushing at home, for that we do pay, because we are creating waste. We are introducing waste to the environment. What is pollution? An introduction of waste into the environment. So we do pay for that, right? Industries might also pay for emitting gases that can be harmful to people and the environment. Industries do pay for emitting gases. The best result are achieved when charges are proportional to the waste produced. So that's why you find that we are not paying the same bill when it comes to municipality rates. We pay as we use, right? So it is more fair when we are paying as we use, so that we don't have to pay the same amount. Imagine you go on a holiday December time, you go visit relatives very far, and then there's no one at home. So you come back January, they say you are owing 2,000. Then you can query it. There was no one at home. The payment must be equal to what I have used. That it becomes more fair. Right, let's go to levying of environmental taxes. A tax could be imposed on output. So these are sometimes green taxes. So we pay for environmental use, and also there is levying of environmental tax. So there are two headings: paying for environmental use and levying of taxes for environment. Right, a tax could be imposed on the output or consumption of good wherever external environmental costs are generated. Remember, we said the market do not care of external costs. So the government is going to force the producer to care about the external cost by charging green taxes. When you produce tires, for example, you are going to pollute the air, then the government is going to charge you for that. You are going to reduce what? The supply. The government uses income generated through these taxes to protect the environment. In 2003, the government has legislated the use of the biodegradable plastics bags, which consumer had to pay for. Prior to that, you may not remember this, because that is back then. we used to pay for plastics. I mean, we used to get plastic for free. Those plastics would say they are non-biodegradable. And then after that, after 2003, the government introduced that we should pay for the plastic. What was the idea behind that? The idea was for us not to buy those plastics, right? Because if your whatever that you are buying from the shop, your groceries or whatever that you are picking up from the shop that you are buying, it's 100 rand, and then you are only, for example, let's say it's 99 rand, and you are only having 100 rand. You may not afford to pay that plastic, as cheap as it looks. Sometimes you do not have the means, you cannot afford to, then you won't buy it, or you bring the plastic from home so that it's sort of reusing it, right? Instead of you buying many plastic, you can reuse the plastic that you have, or you can use paper bags, you can use other alternatives, because we know that plastic is dangerous for the environment. It's biodegradable, it lasts long on the environment, and it can harm our animals, it can harm our environment. So government tried to reduce the usage of plastic by putting a pay on that. Right, the rate of tax should be equal to the marginal external cost as well. Here, the rate of tax that is charged for generating generating those externalities must be equals to the external cost that you have cost, right? So that will be more fair. If you are paying tax that is equal to the production that you are doing. Right. The question will be saying, how do they know that we have polluted to this extent? There are people who are studying environment. Those people can tell. So there are technologies that are used to check that. Right. Paying off environmental subsidies. So we do not pay subsidies. Remember, subsidies is given by the government. So government gives subsidies to those businesses that are taking care of the environment. The business that will stop producing plastic, for example, and use more environmental friendly packaging, then that is a business that the government can subsidize. A businesses that invest in using machines that are not more environmental harmful. Right. This subsidies reduces activities that cause environmental damages. These costs are recovered from taxation. So people are paying for environmental taxes for polluting the environment. The same tax is used to protect the environment. By doing what? By giving those businesses that are taking care of environment subsidies, right? Subsidies could be for the development of new technologies or equipment. It encourages production of environmental friendly subsidies. Encourage recycling of waste such as bottles and cardboard. Right, so if subsidies are given to businesses for them to produce at a cheaper price, they are also encouraging them to take care of the environment. Issuing of marketable permits, issuing of licensing in the usage of environment. Government may limit environmental use by giving marketable permits. As soon as you finish using the permits that you have, then you cannot pollute further. Or because you are avoiding to paying for these marketable permits, you do what? You use now more environmental friendly ways so that you don't have to pay for the marketable permit. Right? Government can decide on the maximum desired level of pollution in the area. Government may wish to charge for the pollution, which is your externality. This means that each factory can pollute to a certain limit. You are given a permit for a certain limit. When you are given a permit, does it mean now the government says to you, go and pollute? It says pollute to a certain maximum according to the permit, right? And also, it encourages you not to pollute, because now when you pollute, you need to pay. A license or credit or permit is offered, and businesses are allowed to sell their licenses to other businesses who wish to expand. So if you are no longer using it, you can sell to other businesses who wish to expand, and then they will use that permit. And then these licenses are traded in a permit market. Then you have command and control. This is more on direct control. There are three things that you need to look at. We'll be looking at those three under command and control. Regulations are set and enforce environmental limits or standards. So the government directly enforce some regulation to say people are going to have certain limits when it comes to damaging or using our environment. Set maximum permitted levels of emission or resources. Use inspectors, monitor activities, and impose fines. So there will be inspectors. If you are above the limit, then they will impose fines. Developed countries have environmental regulation, e.g., air and water pollution, noise, waste management, and recycling. So developed countries do have those environmental regulations so that they can regulate the air, the water, the noise, and waste management when it comes to environment. So there are three things that we look at. There are three approaches of command and control system. Number one, they look at the quantity standard. They focus quantity is the amount of pollution that has been caused by your business. They look at the quality, focus on the environmental impact. Quantity, how much have you polluted? Quality, what is the impact on the environment? Then the social impact, that is now they're looking at the effect on the people living in that community. How are they affected? Remember I said there are people who are studying for environment, then they are able to look at all of those things and they know when you have reached the limit. Right, and we have education. So we have education. Through education, government can ensure sustainability. It changes people's attitude. The more people understand how harmful their activities are to the environment, they start acting better. Right? So it is used to try to change people's attitude towards the environment. Innovative approaches have been tried in developing world to educate people, e.g., setting up community wildlife reserves. Education should include aspect of indigenous knowledge system because indigenous people have a broad knowledge of how to live sustainable. So through education, people's attitude changes, people take care of the environment, and then we also need to include the aspect of our IKS, which is your indigenous knowledge system, because local and indigenous people, they know better ways to sustain the environment. Right, people, this is the continuation for education. People should be made aware of environmental issues and the consequences of their action. To make their consumption habit more environmental friendly, education play an important role in improving people's ability to manage the environment. Right, and then there is voluntary agreements. Businesses prefer this one because there are no rules and regulations. They are voluntarily agree to take care of the environment. So they say we are going to take care of the environment. Right, agreements between government and businesses voluntarily to address negative environmental impact of industries. That's why you find NGOs coming in to take care of the environment because they are voluntarily agreeing to do that. Businesses voluntarily agree to decrease emission of pollutants. Most prefer negotiations so that they can tailor their specific needs and include into their own planning. So it's better when they are negotiating and they can plan better instead of them being forced to. Agreements can be formally, which is legally binding contract, or it can be informal. So you get maximum of 26 marks. Remember, for the headings, you can only mark up to 8 marks. And examples as well, you can only mark up to 8 marks, and then everything else must be fully explained. Right, let's look at the additional part of your essay. The additional part was asking you, why have the international measures been ineffective in reducing the effects of climate change? Right, climate change being the weather patterns that are not normal, too much heat or droughts or floods, too much rain, right? Those who are doing geography as well, they are more clued up when it comes to this content, right? Let's look at our possible answers, responses. There's a lack of commitment from government to meet targets set by the agreement. So remember, there are summits, there are meetings that we have, where there was the meeting in Brazil, the Rio Plus, the Rio meeting, which it was 2000 from 1992. There was meeting again 2000 in Johannesburg, and then there was Rio Plus 5. That was 1997. That included the Kyoto Protocol. So when they are meeting for this summits, they are agreeing on other things. So sometimes you find that the governments of that country are not really sticking to the target that was agreed upon. Then they become ineffective. Emission targets are not met, and the effects of climate change is more visible than ever before, leading to loss in GDP, decreasing in employment, right? As now there is more climate change that can affect production and employment. It is difficult to identify organizations responsible for holding these countries accountable for their action. Sometimes it's difficult within a country to really point out that this organization is the one that is polluting more. There is a lack of strict law enforcement where penalties were not imposed on those who did not meet the targets. So there are rules there, but then there's no strict monitoring of that. People are being charged if they are exceeding the limits. Conflicting interests existed between the goal of achieving sustainable development and increased economic development. So for economic development to take place, there must be more production. More production, it means that the environment will be damaged. So there is a clash between the two goals. The goal of a sustainable environment and the goal of economic growth and economic development. They may clash. Then that will make the agreement to be more ineffective. So anything that is relevant to this question, then you may mark yourself, or you may ask if that is correct or not. Then the maximum for this is 10 marks. Your conclusion, it's a higher order conclusion. Let's look at what example of the conclusion that we have here. The success of the efforts made in addressing environmental problems is dependent on whether the government, business, and consumer around the world take such measures seriously enough to implement them. You can close off with any other higher order statement that is 2 marks, and then for your essay you have 40 marks. We are moving to our next essay that was identified under the environmental sustainability. Right, the question is, discuss in details the following problems and the international measures taken to ensure sustainable development. That is 26 marks. It's your body. There is introduction, body, additional part, and conclusion. So you'll be getting marks for your headings. I think we have about 5 headings of the problems that we have in our examination guideline. Analyze the impact of an increase in the population on the environment. You're analyzing the impact of what? Increased population on the environment. So if there's more of us, what will happen to the environment? What is the impact on environment when there are more people, right? So this again, you'll be answering 5 full sentences for your total 10 marks, right? I'm going to give you again a few minutes, 20 to 25 minutes to do what? To complete this essay. As you remember it, then we are going to go through the marking guideline together so that you can mark yourself. Right, grade 12, your time is up. Thank you for writing. Let's look at the solution as per the marking guideline. Introduction, remember it's your lower order. You can introduce it by introducing what is environmental sustainability like the previous essay, or you can describe what is environment. So here it says environment refers to the physical surroundings and physical conditions that affect people's lives, right? You can get a 2 mark for describing environment or environmental sustainability. For your body, the first thing that you have there is biodiversity loss. Our problem is biodiversity loss. right? So when you're speaking of biodiversity, we're talking about various species, plants and animals within an area, right? So we have a problem that we may lose our biodiversity. So that is the problem. Then we must have a solution. So this essay is also a nice essay, right? Because you come up with there is a problem that you have as a heading. You say the problem is this, and then there is an international measure that you come up to solve that problem. So already you have 5 marks by saying the problem and the international measure plus the subheading. That is already 5 marks. So if you are having 5 headings, then it means you can get 25 marks by just saying the problem and then discussing that problem and giving the measure. Right, so your problem is biodiversity loss. Biodiversity is the variety of species of plants and animals in a particular area. If species become extinct, meaning they die out completely, this cannot be reversed. No one can make these species if they die out completely, right? So for us not to lose them, modern techniques sometimes are used as gene transplant can limit the loss of the species. So they are using modern techniques where they're taking the DNA of this, if it's animal species, and then they are trying to ensure that we do not lose them for good, right? Then we have a international measure that is used, which is your Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. CITES set many policies to deal with the species loss. So CITES is there to ensure that they deal with the species loss. Also in South Africa, we regulate the importation of these species so that we are not losing our biodiversity for good. We do not lose the species for good. So you're getting your marks for doing what? Describing biodiversities, describing what will happen if we lose them. They cannot be reversed. Talking about the modern techniques that are used now to limit the loss of it, and talking about the international measure that we have, which is a site that is dealing with species loss. Monitoring and regulation of the trade in indigenous species is carried out using permits and quotas in South Africa. In South Africa, a permit is needed for an import of plants and animals. That is the continuation of what? Of biodiversity loss. Let's move to the next subheading. You have chemical waste. Right, chemical waste is toxic. It has a negative effect on living beings and can cause infertility or death. Chemical waste needs to be carefully managed to ensure it does not seep into the groundwater. Right, so when you're talking about the chemical waste, you're talking about your oil that can seep into our water and then it will pollute the water. What is the international measure that we have? Is the Stockholm Protocol, which is a United Nations agreement to limit what? Chemical waste. So we have discussed what is the problem, we further described what can be done, and then we now described an international measure. Stockholm Protocol is the measure that is used to ensure that it limits chemical waste. Then we have hazardous waste. Hazardous waste is more than chemical waste, and it includes toxic metals, waste such as lead, oil spills, radioactive waste. Right. Hazardous waste has a slow decomposition rate. It means it stays poisonous for a long time. So you have chemical waste, and then you have your hazardous waste, which are also very dangerous for our environment. Hazardous waste can endanger all life forms and the entire ecosystems. Then what measure do we use? We use the Basel Convention. It's an international treaty that aims to reduce movement of hazardous waste between nations, particularly from developed to less developed countries. So Basel Convention is the international measure that we use that will limit the movement of hazardous waste. Hazardous waste is usually dumped illegally because it is convenient and cheap for people to dump this illegally. For example, it's written on your battery, cell phone battery, that you must not dump it in other places, but then because it's convenient for us, what we do, just put it in the dustbin and then that's it. Right. Your next heading is climate change. Global warming primarily causes climate change. So global warming can result in climate change. Climate change can be reversed through widespread international cooperation. Right? So if we come together, we may limit your global climate change. Sharing weather information and weather patterns, agreeing to limit pollution and banning chemical products such as greenhouse gases that damage the ozone layer. What international measure we have is the Kyoto Protocol of 1997. Is an international agreement to limit production of greenhouse gases because voluntary reduction of carbon dioxide levels did not succeed. So here we have a problem as well, and then we have an international measure that we have, which is your Kyoto Protocol. Then the last one is your loss of indigenous knowledge. Also, you mark the heading. Indigenous people have knowledge about the natural environment which they often make use of, make it for their living. Indigenous people use organic methods and natural processes in dealing with the environment. So those indigenous knowledge systems is how local people live and then how they use the environment. So they use more organic methods, right? So local capacity building is important as it helps indigenous people to learn more on the environment beyond their traditional lifestyles and experiences. And so it is important to take care of our indigenous knowledge so that we do not lose it forever. What do we use to do that? What international measure is most? Your management of social transformation program is an initiative by the UNESCO. It's a global effort to document local and indigenous knowledge before it is lost forever. So most is used to do what? To protect our indigenous knowledge before we lose it forever, right? And then you give 2 marks here, and then the maximum for the essay is 26 marks, 8 marks for your heading, maximum of 8 marks for heading and example and listing of information. Let's look at the additional part. The additional part, the question was to analyze the impact of an increased population. The more there is people on the environment, what is the impact? Right, when there's more people living within an area, what will happen to the environment? There will be demand for food, meaning the demand for food increasing, thereby putting pressure on the environment. Remember, we need to plant more, then it puts strain on the environment. Deforestation due to increased demand for infrastructure development. We need to have more infrastructure for industries, building of houses, then we need to cut down trees. Increased human settlement causing soil erosion and loss of biodiversity. As people need houses, this may create removal of trees, which can result in soil erosion, right? Remember, deforestation is when we remove trees permanently, and soil erosion is the removal of soil at a greater volume than it is created. Increased land and water pollution as more biological and non-biological waste will be introduced to the environment. Right, as we continue with the additional part, depletion of raw material due to increased production of goods and services. We may deplete our raw material. Resources will be used severely strained when population increase, e.g. water. An increase in the burning of fossil fuel such as coal and petrol due to high demand for energy. If you have answered anything that is relevant to an increase in population to the environment, you may mark yourself, and the maximum will be 10 marks. Let's look at the conclusion. The solution to our environmental problems would depend on the ability to make sound economic decisions that take account of natural environment and to change our individual behavior and attitude. Remember, this one as well is any higher order response that you may have to conclude, as long as you are not repeating the information in the body. Then you get 2 marks, and then your total will be 40 marks. Right, so grade 12, we looked at 2 essays that are possible on environmental sustainability. It is important for you to know these 2 essays because If they come on question 6, then you are going to be smiling, right? Grade 12, thank you very much for joining into this class. I will see you next time. Thank you.